Welcome to Cook the Garden Podcast, your weekly audio source for delicious and easy garden fresh recipes and growing tips. I'm your host, Ginain. Let's cook the garden. Hello, garden foodies. I'm so excited to kick off a new season of Cook the Garden. I can't wait to have continued conversations, continued learning and sharing, and more inspiration, and definitely more delicious garden-to-table recipes. I can't think of a better way to start the season off and to celebrate Women's History Month than by chopping it up with my good friend, the amazing Dalia Colón. Dalia is a multimedia journalist and the author of the Florida Vegetarian Cookbook. She's the executive producer and host of the Zest Podcast on the NPR network. She's also the associate producer and co-host of WEDU Arts Plus on Tampa Bay's PBS station. And Dalia is also a former James Beard Awards judge. She lives in Riverview, Florida with her beautiful family and never leaves home without a snack. Definitely a girl after my own heart. So today we're talking a little bit more about Florida food traditions. You don't have to be from Florida to appreciate this conversation. Dalia shares some really interesting stories and also a little bit of Florida history. She's also sharing her delicious recipe from her cookbook, which I have also included the link to in the show notes. I hope you all enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. So without further ado, let's go ahead and welcome Dalia. Hey, Dalia. Welcome to
the
Garden Podcast.
Ginain, I'm so excited to be here. I feel like I've arrived.
Oh, gosh, stop it. Thank you so much. I'm so honored that you're joining me today. You know, we talked earlier before we started recording, but this has been a long time in the making, so I'm really excited.
Me too. And when I found out you live like 10 minutes from me, I mean, it doesn't get any better than that.
I know. It's just, look, this is all meant to happen, and the timing is perfect. And I'm just so thrilled to have this conversation. And you just had me on your podcast, which was so much fun.
That's right. You were a Zest guest on the Zest Podcast from WUSF Public Media. So This is great. People can listen to both episodes.
I know. It's the best of both worlds. And I'm super excited for this collaboration. And we'll be doing a lot more. So I'm really, really just honored that you said yes to me. So
of course.
Yeah. So of course, we're going to be talking about all kinds of fun things today. Just everything that you're doing with the podcast. The new cookbook is out. Oh my gosh, like there's so much to dig into. But before we jump into the conversation, I'm curious, what are you growing or what's in your garden, or do you have any future garden aspirations?
Ooh, great question. I do not have a green thumb like you. I'm trying to get to your level, but I do always want to grow something because I feel like as humans, we just have a connection with the earth. And so I really enjoy that. Anything I can grow. So I've got 2 raised beds on wheels that are on the side of my house. My husband, Braulio, actually put them together for me. Nice. And I've got herbs, cilantro, basil, green onions, just things that you can run out when you're cooking dinner and like sprinkle a little on top. I have been really into Italian chopped salad lately. That's kind of my go-to. Ooh. And so I got tired of buying romaine. So I planted some romaine and some celery. And then I've got some purple cauliflower, which I only bought by accident because I was looking for broccoli and the nursery didn't have any. And I had my kids with me. I didn't want to go to another store. I'm like, I'll just get whatever they got. But purple cauliflower is so much fun because it's just so pretty. I also recently bought a mango tree. It's like a little baby mango tree because I love mango. So in like 2 years, I'll invite you over. You can have some mango.
I love it.
And then I got a banana plant and we'll see how that does. I feel like the thing that I'm always running to the store for are bananas because they just don't last that long on the counter. So if I could grow my own, I would feel like I've unlocked a new level of like success. So we'll see how that goes.
Oh my gosh. I love that you said that because we all kind of have our, like aspirations and ideas of what success looks like. And for me, honestly, it's totally like having my own like food desert in the background, being able to just walk into my backyard and pick my dinner.
I'll
That
come
to
over.
me is
Pick
success.
mine.
But you know what's so funny you said that. You're like, I'm not on your level yet. Girl, you just listed off like 50 things that you're growing.
You know what? That's actually true. And you can grow a lot in a small amount of space. I'm talking,
Yes.
I have these 2 raised beds that we ordered online, and they're on wheels. So they're up high and you don't have to like break your back. And then my
Yeah.
neighbor, he's amazing. He actually put fatter tires on them so that I can move them. Like if there's going to be a frost, I can just wheel them into the garage.
Oh,
It's
that's
much
the
easier to
best.
move them, which is great.
Absolutely.
But I've interviewed a lot of chefs for the Zest podcast, and they all say, like, just grow something, grow some herbs on your windowsill or on your balcony in an apartment building. And it does make a difference. Like the food just
Yeah.
tastes better when it has that little homegrown touch.
Oh, I love that. I know you've got little ones. Well, not so little ones anymore, but do they get involved or do you get them involved in what you're growing at all?
Yes, they're 7 and 11, and my stepdaughter's 24, so she's really not the little one. She's bigger than
Yeah.
me. But yes, the 7 and 11-year-old helped pick out the plants at the nursery, and then they helped plant
Nice.
them. And
Oh, how
so they like to
fun.
water it. And, if we go outside to check the mail or something, they'll say, let's check on our plants. So
Oh,
it
that's
is,
so
it is
cool.
fun. Kids love growing things. And actually, the daycare and summer camp where my son goes has the most incredible garden. I'll
Ah,
give them a shout out, the Village Early Learning Center in Brandon.
nice.
But it's just beautiful. And I've actually learned a lot there from Wanda, who oversees the garden, and then they do cooking classes with the kids.
Oh, that is so amazing. Wow. I love that they do the cooking classes with the kids because it does kind of like connects the dots, like they get to see
Yeah.
the food growing out of the ground, but then what do you do with all of this food that you just, cultivated? So I think that's amazing. So wow, shout out to them because I mean it's hard when you have like so many other things you need to do, like, teach the kids and so just to give them that piece, I think is such a gift and such, they're really cultivating, for lack of a better term, but you know what I mean? Like they're really cultivating future, not only future leaders, but just like future home cooks or chefs or,
Yes.
gardeners. So that's really,
And they
really
even do a
awesome.
little restaurant for the parents in the
Ah,
summer, which is
that's so
super
amazing.
cute. And sometimes they'll sell the excess. But I love it too, because especially our kids today are like, and we all are just glued to our screens. And so to
Yes.
get outside and dig in the dirt is something we all need.
Absolutely. Love it, love it. So let's dive a little bit into some of the work you're doing because you are just like out there. You're doing some amazing things from the food scene, even from the podcast to your book. So let's jump a little bit into what you're doing with the Zest podcast. Kind of talk a little bit about what the Zest is. I've been listening a lot to it, just binge listening. I know you guys just started a new season, which is awesome. There's a really cool series you guys have going on through this month. But what are some of the what do you want the listeners to know about the Zest podcast? What are some of the conversations being had and all that good stuff?
Well, thank you for asking. So the Zest's tagline will tell you a little bit more about us. It's citrus, seafood, Spanish flavor, and Southern charm. The Zest celebrates cuisine and community in the Sunshine State. I say that every week. It's been our intro. We're now in season 9, and we've said it every
Wow.
week, every time.
It's
But
ingrained.
yeah, I could say it in my sleep, but that's what we're trying to do. And so Florida, people think of Florida food as like seafood, which it is, maybe Cuban sandwiches, key lime pie. And we have had episodes on all of those things, but it's also so much more because we just have such a diversity of people who live here. And then, of course, people who visit. So we talked to James Beard award-winning chefs. That's like the Oscars of the food world. We've had some really big names on. We've had Chef Michelle Bernstein in Miami. We've
Wow.
had Chef Art Smith, who is from North Florida, and he's probably best known as former personal chef to Oprah. We've had a little
Wow.
bit of everybody. This morning, I interviewed Wendy Wesley, who's a nutritionist in St. Petersburg. She's been on a few times, and she recently taught a cooking class for USF St. Pete students who have intellectual disabilities. So I
Oh,
interviewed her
wow.
with a student named Taylor, and they talked about the importance of anybody, not just someone with disabilities and not just a college student, but anybody having independence and becoming more confident and healthier through cooking at home. We also love food history and just digging
Yes.
into things like we had an episode on how the Spanish settlers brought pigs to Florida when they first conquered Florida, and
Yep.
pigs run rampant. I mean, literally, you and I live in Riverview. There are,
Yeah.
to this day, wild pigs running around Riverview, and it's because the Spanish brought them there because they wanted to have
Wow.
that supply of pork. We've done episodes. There's just so many. I'm trying to think what we want to highlight. We've had distilleries. We've had sommeliers on.
Oh,
We've done a lot with barbecue. We've had the dietitian from the Rays. We've had the chef for the Buccaneers talking about, what
wow.
Tom Brady ate. This was when he was still part of the team. We've had a firefighter and chef. We've done episodes on dairy and beekeeping. So just it's something different all the time. And our goal is just to inspire pride in Florida food. We've actually changed our focus a little bit. In the beginning, it was more try this restaurant. Here's how to make this Cuban sandwich, but you can find a recipe anywhere.
Right.
So we just want
Exactly.
to get a sense of like Florida food culture. And when we look at our analytics, it's not just people in Florida who are listening, it's people all over the world.
Yeah. I was just going to ask you that because I mean, although it's Florida based, like you're literally like it's just digging into all of the diverse culture of Florida, but it really does, like, to me, the conversations that are being had are way beyond just like regional or state. I mean, it really is like a broader conversation that you bring to the table and people are interested. Like I love the history part of it, right? And so like when you think about Florida's cultural diversity, like there are so many cuisines in the state alone. Like how do you how do you decide like okay what do we do next or who do we spotlight next and can you shed a little bit light like how do you decide because it's a huge state first of all and there's so many different just ethnic groups cultures just all of that how do you decide.
I just want everybody to feel seen. And it's funny because when we
Oh, I
started
love
the
that.
podcast, I felt like, oh my gosh, we're going to run out of things to talk about. And actually, it's funny because I just taught a podcasting workshop last week at the Poynter Institute for Media Studies in St. Petersburg. And it was a group of like mostly journalists in their 20s. And she said, I want to start a podcast, but I'm afraid like I'll run out of ideas. And
Mm.
I said, girl, just get the first 5 banked and then you can start scheduling them out. And every time you do one, you're going to have 5 more ideas. After
That's
this
right.
conversation with you, Ginain, I'm going to have 10 more
Yes,
ideas. I just know it.
exactly.
And so we started with the obvious, Cuban sandwich, Cuban coffee. We talked about, Tarpon Springs and the Greek cuisines, and those are all amazing. But as the years progress, we've gotten into like Haitian food. We interviewed
Mm.
Chef Ale Lemaire in South Tampa, and sorry, South Tampa, Chef Ale Lemaire in South Florida, and he talked about the origin of soup jamu, which is a
Yes.
Haitian Independence Day soup, and it's pumpkin soup. And during
Yes.
slavery, only the slaveholders were allowed to enjoy this soup. And so as soon as the Black Haitians became free, it's kind of like sticking it to the man, like, we're going to eat the thing you never let us have. And so
That's
now
right.
every New Year's Day, which is Haitian Independence Day, they enjoy soup jamu. So yes, it's about food, but it's about so much more than that. And then there are
Yeah.
things that are unique to Florida. Like we did an episode with Janet Keeler, who's a former food journalist for the Tampa Bay Times, how to make a better hurricane food kit. Because that's not something
Oh my
everybody in the
gosh.
world experiences. But when
Yes.
like, there's a chance the power could go out, I won't have my fridge and my freezer and my stove. Like, what are we going to eat? I don't want to just eat canned ravioli. You know what I mean? And so
Exactly.
those episodes are fun too because they're just so unique to Florida. Or like, what cocktails should we make for a day at the beach? You know? So we talk about it all.
Only a
And we're
fellow
having a lot of
Floridian
fun.
would appreciate what do you make during a hurricane, right? Like it brings me
Exactly.
back to like our last hurricane and we lost power and we have a Blackstone which runs off of, like gas, propane or whatever. So we were eating good. Like you would
Oh,
think, oh, the power's out and we're on like, canned ravioli, whatever. Girl, we were making because we had to use up the stuff that was in a fridge or a freezer. So we made hibachi. We
oh, I
made
should have been at your house.
hibachi. Yeah. Hey, next time we'll make it a hurricane party. But
We'll collaborate.
luckily it was a mild storm and we just had power out for a day or two. But yeah. So I just love that you guys think of that because only a fellow Floridian would know. But then I think folks in other states would be like, oh, what would you eat during a hurricane? And that's even a thing. Like people don't think about that. So I just love the uniqueness of the conversations.
Thank you.
That's awesome. So a little bit, just kind of still piggybacking off of that, we talked about some of the cultural, nuances and how diverse Florida is. Are there any like stories that pop out? I mean, you just talked about a few. I love the story about the Haitian Americans and the soup, but are there like any stories that really just like jump out at you from like a Florida perspective or a cultural perspective? I don't know. Like, what do you think?
Oh, that's such a great question. Okay, something we talk a lot about is the decline of Florida's citrus industry. And I
Ah,
know I said in the intro of the show, citrus, seafood, Spanish flavor, and Southern charm. But the fact is, if you go to your grocery store, a lot of oranges and limes, they're not necessarily grown here. The oranges, there's a good chance they're from California. The limes are probably from Mexico. And that's for a few different reasons, but one of them is that citrus greening has like ravaged Florida's citrus
yeah,
industry. And so that's a unique problem because this is something that we sort of built our reputation on. And now we have to figure out a way to move forward. So we
yeah.
don't like sugarcoat that. We talked about it with a historian. On the flip side, there's the strawberry industry. Plant City, they called it Itty Bitty Plant City, and it's the winter strawberry capital of the world.
That's
So
right.
we did an episode on how that festival got so big and how Plant City strawberries got so big. And it goes back to like the 1800s. They had their crops, like lumber and cattle and those things. And there was a big freeze that year. And they could no longer grow those things or cultivate those crops. And so they said, well, what are we going to do? Okay, well, let's just try, I don't know, strawberries. And a small group of farmers grew some strawberries. They found out that they actually did very well in Florida's winter climate and it took off. And then that coupled with Henry Plant, the railroad magnate who
Yes.
brought his railroad to Florida and sort of built it out, they were able to send strawberries all over the country.
Wow.
And after that first year, it was almost 100 years ago, actually, but in celebration of the crop sort of saving this little town, Plant City, they had a strawberry festival. And look at it now. It's so big. I mean, if you're driving
It's
down I-4,
huge.
you're going to be stuck in that traffic because everybody wants strawberry shortcake.
That's
Everybody wants to
right.
see the concerts. They bring A-listers. I mean, Taylor Swift performed there before she was Taylor Swift. I saw Boys to Men there with my husband. That was so much fun. So
It's a big
yes, it's
deal.
about food, but
Yeah.
every food story is about so much more than food.
Ah,
So we love
yeah.
to tell those stories, and I've
I
got a
love
million
that.
more
Oh, I'm sure
like.
you do. And it's so, and you just, I love having you on here because you're actually giving us some of the history. Because I always talk about like, okay, strawberries are a big deal, but I never knew why. So thank you for sharing that little bit of history there. That's really, really interesting. And this episode actually will probably be coming out around like the Strawberry Festival. So perfect timing.
Perfect. Yes. And then you have a new appreciation for it. It's not just so
You
you can go
do.
on Jeopardy and show how much you know, but like when you see a sign that says we sell Plant City strawberries, you want to stop there because you have this
Absolutely.
deep connection,
You do.
And
You
so, or
do.
you want to try to grow them in your yard because you know that our climate is good for growing strawberries in the winter.
Absolutely. No, I love that. So let's talk a little bit about your cookbook because you have a new
Yes.
cookbook coming out. So super excited. So it's the Florida Vegetarian Cookbook. Tell us a little bit
Yes.
about that.
So it features more than 120 plant-based recipes. Most of them are vegan, which means no animal products whatsoever, no cheese, nothing like that, no milk, eggs, but they are all meat-free. And I've been a vegetarian for over a decade. I was one of those people who watched a documentary. The one I watched was Vegucated. So you've been
Yeah.
warned. Watch it at your own risk. People watch something and then they change their life. I literally never ate meat again. I went cold
Wow.
turkey. And I really don't miss it. There's so much, especially in 2024. Like, what a great time to change the way you eat because there are so many resources available to us. You've got my cookbook, which you
That's
can get
right.
through University Press or Barnes and Noble. It's on Amazon to make it easy for you. Just Google the Florida Vegetarian Cookbook and you'll see my picture on it. But there are also like Instagram accounts and TikTok and blogs and just so many places. I'm always pinning recipes on Pinterest that just look good to me.
Yeah.
There's
And
just a
are
million
good.
things to eat. They're
Yeah.
so good. Yeah. And I just feel like there's a million things to eat. There are so many hacks. If you want something that tastes like meat or tastes like cheese, there are ways to do that too.
Absolutely. No, I love that you said that. And, I would imagine that even, and we talked about this too when I was on your podcast, but there's, for me, I know for me, I consider myself more of like a flexitarian. If I needed to like go back and forth, I can, but you almost kind of like, especially someone like myself who I grow a lot, you just start eating more like vegetarian meals or vegan meals, like, and you start incorporating more vegetables into, your meals on a daily basis. So you said you went cold turkey, but I would even imagine, I mean, I've checked out some of your recipes. Even someone who is a meat eater, it's not like scary, right? Like there are still things that you can make to incorporate it into, your regular diet. Even if you do, like I know in my house, like we're kind of mixed. I have mostly meat eaters, but we're all pretty flexitarian. But if I do have like folks over who are like vegan or vegetarian, like I learn how to accommodate, right? So like maybe you're making this like vegan meal, but you still have some meat eaters in there. So I just kind of like do the meat separate. So even if you just wanted to have, a veggie lo mein or veggie fried rice, we can still do that for the vegetarians and vegans. And we still have like the meat option available. But I just love incorporating more vegetables, the concept of that, because you can't go wrong. Like it's good for you. So how do you find, like, have you gotten feedback from other folks who maybe aren't vegetarian or vegan from the cookbook, and what are their thoughts about it?
I love that question because that was my goal. People like me who have been eating this way for a decade or many decades, we already know what to make. We already know where to get our protein.
Right.
And so it's the people who are maybe dipping in a toe or they want to do meatless Monday or just lean into it, which is totally fine. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. They're the
Right.
ones who maybe need some inspiration. And so my husband is a meat eater. He just went to a dinner meeting last night. I was like, what'd you have? He said steak. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
My kids like the occasional chicken nugget. That's
Yeah.
totally fine. But a lot of people do want to lean into it a little bit more. Actually, 5% of the country is either vegetarian or vegan, according to, I think, the
Wow.
Pew Research Center. So
Yeah.
4% vegetarian, which means no meat, and then 1% vegan, which means no animal products at all.
Right.
So no milk, eggs, cheese, even honey, the vegans would consider an animal product because it
Right.
comes from bees. So it was funny because I made all of these recipes and I wrote all of them, finished the manuscript. And then last year, with the help of a great food photographer in South Tampa named Chip Weiner, I highly recommend following him on Instagram. We recreated many of these dishes to take photos of them. And then what are you going to do with all this food? We're making dozens of dishes in only a couple of days. My parents came down from Ohio to help me with the kids and help
Oh,
chop
I
vegetables
love
and all
it.
that stuff. And so we had to give it away to the neighbors. So I bought some to-go containers, and I would get feedback from, my next door neighbor, Harry, who's in his 80s, and his wife, Vonda, who's in her 70s. They would text and say how much they enjoyed, like the buffalo
Oh,
cauliflower. That was one of their favorites, or like a carrot, raisin, and chickpea salad. I brought some lemon zucchini coffee cake muffins to my next door neighbor, Yoko,
so
on the other
cool.
side. And I still have her text. She was just gushing about how much she loved it
That's so
and how she didn't
awesome.
think she would like, citrus and zucchini in her muffins, but she just gobbled it up. So I love getting that feedback. Like, bring on the skeptics.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. I absolutely love this. And I think by the time this comes out, the cookbook may already be out in March. Is that when it comes out?
The cookbook will be out March 26th, which is a
Okay.
Tuesday. And I'm not sure when this is coming out, but it's available whenever you are hearing this. It is now available to pre-order or to order. If you
Awesome.
pre-order it, you'll get it on March 1st. And then if you just order it, you'll get it when it comes.
Awesome. I'll definitely include all that information in the show notes as well. So I know folks are definitely going to be interested in supporting you in that way. So I'm really excited for you. I mean, that's just
Thank
such
you.
a milestone. And I've heard from so many different like cookbook authors, like it's almost kind of like giving birth. Like this is actually like your baby. Do you
Yes,
find that? Is that pretty accurate?
that's exactly how it feels. So I'll tell you, I never set out to host a food podcast. I was the producer, and then the host, Robin Sussingham, left, and it just kind of fell into my lap. So now I'm the executive producer and the host. So that was the first thing I never thought I'd do. Then I
Yeah.
was contacted during the pandemic by the University Press of Florida asking if I would be interested in writing a cookbook. We
Wow.
all remember the pandemic, and those of us with kids probably were not having the time of our lives. We were doing like homeschooling and wiping off groceries, and my son
Right.
was 3 or 4 at the time. So I'm trying to keep him entertained and learning how to read. He couldn't even write his name. I was like, he's never going to amount to anything. Like, I don't have time to write a
Aw,
cookbook. I have to teach him to write his name. He is now one of the best readers and writers in his class, I'm proud to say.
that's
But
amazing.
I just thought, what an interesting opportunity. And they asked if you did have a cookbook, what would you want it to be about? And so we threw out a few ideas, and vegetarian cookbook was the one that stuck. So it definitely felt like my pandemic baby,
Yeah.
writing all of these recipes, ordering my groceries or going into the store with a mask, figuring out what's in season, how many things can I make with collard greens. I've got a collard green cake in there. I've got collard green pasta, just all sorts of things
Wow.
that and it's kind of like you have to push yourself, because what I
Yeah.
realized is we all make probably the same like 5 to 10 recipes in
Yeah.
rotation. And that's those of us who are cooking, because there are a lot of people who
Right.
don't cook anything and they just order out all the time. But those of us
Right.
who are committed to cooking at home, it can be challenging to come up with new things. And so, not every recipe was a hit. Like my poor husband had to eat the ones that did not end up in the book.
That's too
And
funny.
so, now we're eating peanut butter and jelly for dinner because
Yeah.
I thought I could make jackfruit ropa vieja, and it was disgusting.
I love that though. I love those stories because it truly is just sometimes it's trial and error. Sometimes it's like, okay, this sounds great. And until you make it and it's just like, okay, maybe not, or maybe
Yeah.
this needs to be tweaked. But I love that you got your family involved, and it that really is a project that I mean, because what we're in 2023 or 2024 now, so it's been like it sounds like 3 years in the making, at least three to
Yeah.
four
It was a
years in the
long
making.
time.
So
Yeah.
it takes a lot of dedication and kind of, like picking yourself back up when something does like fall flat, like, okay, well, that didn't work. Okay, on to the next thing. So, man, kudos to you and congratulations. That's so, so super exciting.
Oh, thank you. And I just want to encourage people, especially if you're a newer cook and you're one of those people who like follows the recipe to the T, don't be afraid to just break out and try something different, because the recipe was written by a human just like you and
Right.
me. And not everything is going to be a success.
Yes.
The person in the NBA who had the most missed shots was Kobe Bryant, who
Yep.
we all know was amazing. So you got to take a lot of shots, and they're not
That's
all going to go
right.
in, but it's worth it. And just
Ah,
keep some PB&J on standby for if it
there you
doesn't work
go.
out, it's okay.
I love that. That's so encouraging. I think a lot of people need to hear that, you know. I forget a lot of times too that you know, what maybe your wheelhouse or like your zone of genius maybe isn't someone else's. I mean, I know that I growing up, like I didn't do a lot of cooking. I honestly didn't get into cooking and gardening till like well into my adulthood when I realized like, okay, I've got a family. I need to really like figure this thing out because we don't want to be eating McDonald's every night. So sometimes it just takes work and getting creative and having fun. Just have fun, and that you can't go wrong with that. And sometimes, you know, not everything will work out, but that's okay.
Yep.
So I love that. Thanks for sharing that with the cookbook. Tell us a little bit about this amazing recipe that you're sharing with the Cook the Garden community using, okay, I love beets, first of all. So I've got some growing in my garden as we
Oh,
speak.
amazing. I
So,
need to plant
yes,
some.
yeah. So
Yes. So
share with
this
us. It sounds
recipe
amazing.
Sure. So this recipe is in the Florida Vegetarian Cookbook, and it's called Ruby Red Roasted Beet Hummus.
Ooh.
Please do not turn off this podcast just because you don't like beets, because I promise I have served this to people who say they hate beets and they have loved it. It like brings the house down every time. So one thing I found out when I was a kid, I hated vegetables, or at least I thought so. But it turned out I just didn't necessarily like the way they were prepared, maybe in my home. There's a million ways to prepare vegetables. You can eat them raw, you can boil them, you can roast them, and roasting root vegetables brings out a sweetness in them. So root vegetables are things that grow under the ground, like carrots, beets, sweet potatoes. The great thing about this recipe is that you can roast the beets ahead of time. So what you do is you take one large beet. I sometimes will get crazy and throw in three just to really make the color pop. Um, and, you know, you're going to take off the skin. You're going to dice it up, roast it on a sheet pan with salt and pepper, just salt and a little bit of
Yeah.
olive oil. And you can put that in your fridge for another day, or you can go ahead and finish making the recipe. If you have leftovers, it's great on a salad. And then you're just going to put in all the things that go in hummus, like chickpeas, garlic, lemon, tahini, salt, and just blend it in. I use a Vitamix, but if you have a blender or an immersion blender or a food processor, that would be great. And then you just taste it and adjust the seasonings to your liking. You can throw in more beets, and the red color is just
Ah,
so vibrant. That's why I called it ruby red.
yes,
And many chefs have told me this, and it's so true. We eat with our eyes first.
that's
So the
true.
great thing about fruits and vegetables and herbs is that they're just naturally gorgeous. You
Yeah,
know, a steak is just brown. And actually, Chip Weiner, who photographed the cookbook, even said brown food is very hard to photograph because it just
it
isn't
is.
that attractive. But when you talk about like beautiful beets, and then you put that on a platter, maybe with some veggies like some yellow bell peppers or some orange carrots, some green broccoli, you can just throw in some crackers, pita chips, pretzel chips. You could, not everybody wants to hear this, but you could just use it as a spread on like a turkey sandwich or something. You
Yeah.
know, if
Oh
you
my
just are trying
gosh,
to
you can do
eat
so
more
much with
veggies,
that.
you could also substitute sweet potatoes or carrots or whatever roasted root vegetables you've got left over from last night's dinner. What I love about this recipe, not only does it look beautiful, but you can make it ahead of time and you can serve it at any temperature. So if you're having a dinner party and you need something that you can just have ready to go when the guests arrive or while you're finishing the main course, this is something that you could set out and not worry about it. And there are never any leftovers.
Ah, I love it. Man, that sounds so easy too. Like just so approachable and easy and just very little stress, right? And I'm all about that.
Yeah, me too. And really, the vegetables, just let them be the star. Let them shine. Like
Yes,
this is not the era of like a meat, a side, and a vegetable. Like the vegetable can
right.
be the star of the show. Beets are just
Exactly.
beautiful, and they come in different colors. You could do
They
this with
do.
yellow beets.
Yes.
You
Oh
could
my
do this with
gosh.
purple sweet potato.
I love it because you can really like make it look seasonal too. So if you're not doing like the deep reds, like you said, you can do the yellow, or you could just get so creative with it. And it's just a beautiful display. I love platters, so I'm just kind of envisioning like this beautiful like seasonal platter, with all types of
Ooh,
root
what else? Because
veggies
this is
and
where you come
herbs.
in. This is where your eyes come into it because you have such a
Yeah.
knack for that. So what else should I be putting on there?
Oh my goodness. I can honestly like envision something similar to so I had on the last season of Cook the Garden, Beta and Beta, who run the Modern Persian Food Podcast. And they shared something called Sebzi Hordan. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But what it is, it's a beautiful like platter with like raw veggies and herbs. And you can have like pita bread on the side of it, but I love it because you can literally like people don't realize like the power of herbs and the flavor. Like you just and so
Yes.
you kind of just eat the herbs raw like that, but with like you've got your tzatziki or like hummus,
Mm.
your pita bread, and it's just eating raw, delicious food that just grows out of the ground. Sometimes you don't have to cook it, right? Like it's beautiful, it's delicious. And it goes really well on the side of if you are, like eating meats or like even just braised, meats or whatever, like it's kind of like really nice to have because it's refreshing. It kind of cuts the oil if you're eating like meats on the side or whatever. But I'm just envisioning something like that, just a beautiful like platter with fresh veggies, root veggies, and herbs. And maybe if you want to do like the pita bread on the sides with your different hummus dips and this roasted beet hummus. It sounds amazing. Like I can see that in a display like this. But yeah, delicious.
I'm gonna do that. I love that idea.
Yeah, yeah. So, oh my gosh. So I'm definitely gonna try doing that. I'm gonna make that over the weekend. And I will be sharing hopefully I'm successful with it. So I'll share it on social media, guys. So you guys will be able to see my ruby red roasted beet hummus. I'm so excited.
I can't wait to see what you do with it. Let me know how you like it.
Yeah, and
If
I
you
love
don't
that
like
you.
it, don't let me know.
Oh gosh, I'm sure I'm going to absolutely love it because like everything you do, I love. And it's kind of going back to your point, you can really kind of doctor up stuff the way you feel like you need to. Like sometimes you don't have to stick to the recipe, like sometimes it really is a matter of like preference, or maybe you don't have a certain ingredient but then subbing it out for something else, or giving it a different like flavor profile. So I like to play around with recipes too, and I like to keep that in mind for people who are reading my content. And I think your content is so approachable, which is I love that, because I've seen some where it's just like, okay, that could be a little intimidating for people, but
Hmm.
your approach is so just approachable. Your approach is so
Oh,
approachable
thank
and
you.
relatable and not scary, but still like amazing, delicious food. And like this is going to be great. So I'm really, really just happy for all your success, and this conversation has been so fun. Don't you think?
Oh, the feeling is mutual. I just love this. I love everything you're doing with
Yeah.
the podcast and with Cook, Pray, Slay. And you're just so
Thank
down to earth. And I
you.
feel the same way about you.
Yeah. I love it. So before we end, just kind of remind us again how folks can stay connected with you, the podcast, all that good stuff.
Sure. So you can listen to the Zest podcast. New episodes come out every Thursday morning. And you can follow us whatever platform you use to get your podcasts, or at thezestpodcast.com. We're also on Facebook and Instagram at The Zest Podcast. And I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly Twitter, at Dalia Colón, DALIACOLON.
Awesome. This was so much fun. Thank you so much for coming on. We'll have to do this again because there's just so much more we can dive into.
Oh, yeah. We just scratched the surface. Anytime. I would love to come back.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dalia. And thank you all for listening. Thank you for tuning in to this week's Cook the Garden. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a 5-star review. As a new podcast, it really helps to add value while growing our awesome community. As always, I really appreciate it. Until next time, friends, keep slaying those garden fresh recipes.